stage our first panel member, Professor Barnali Nag, faculty IIM Kashipur. Professor Nag will be the moderator for the discussion.
Then I would like to call upon Mr. Subir Chowdhury. Mr. Chowdhury is the Executive Vice President of JCB India.
Next, I would like to call upon stage Mr. Rakesh Sharma. He is the Group President, Human Resources, Topworth Group of Companies, Mumbai.
Last but not the least, I would like to invite on stage Mr. Samiron Ghoshal. He is partner, India IT Advisory Leader, Global Talent Hub Leader, IT Services at Ernst & Young. Panelists, I would like to inform you that the panel discussion will be for 1 hour, followed by question-answer round. May I request you all to please begin the discussion.
Very warm welcome to Mr. Chowdhury, Mr. Ghoshal, Mr. Sharma. Mr. Sharma, would you like to open the discussion on industry, academia, communication gap, need of the hour?
Good afternoon. First of all, many thanks for inviting me on this occasion. It's heartening to see students taking this initiative, professors joining them, and creating this kind of environment in which people from industry and academics can really sit together along with students and debate on certain issues. So thank you so much for this. When I was just thinking about collaboration between academics and industry, this particular subject has been definitely discussed at length at various forums. And I think probably this will be my 6th or 7th forum in which the theme, of course, with a different flavor. You have really created a good flavor and you have really structured it very well. The fact remains that we are all definitely concerned in a positive way of building up strong bonding vis-a-vis industry, or academics is really interested. And if you really want to understand what's really going on in terms of this collaboration, of course, in the previous sessions, you've already discussed the kind of skill sets which are required by the industry, the kind of students which are being produced by academics. We have already had a lot of discussions on the previous session, so I would not really spend so much time in initiating this dialogue and discussion on the skill sets which are required to be developed. I'll focus more on the communication per se and the bonding between the academics and also industry. Of course, my friend Professor will advise me in case I do not take away her thrill of moderating the discussion, but I'm just initiating it. So in case somewhere I go haywire, please do moderate me. So you hear different voices if you look at this particular theme. Academics, if you talk to academics will say, hey, we really contribute, we really prepare students very well, we have a grand syllabus, we really tune into the needs of the industry, but here the industry is not really understanding us, they are not listening us. They don't understand what role we can play in building up their organizations. And again, I'm not talking about preparing students. I'm taking you a little longer, broader than that. And I'm saying, what kind of bonding exists is there a good amount of understanding between industry and academics? If you listen to academics or industry, they would say academics are interested more in creating a brand and image. Of course, they have good students, but many a times we feel that some of the projects in which we would like them to get involved, they don't really take initiatives, they don't come forward. And therefore, there is a gap in terms of a need which is there. Have we created enough need? So my first question, probably to the other panelists would also be there, that in this whole process of understanding the communication gap, what kind of a need exists between the academics and industry? Barring something which we already know in terms of preparing students for industry, barring something we already know that preparing students with a skill set which the industry needs, but what kind of a need exists? Does the industry in a real sense over a longer period of time want to really be involved and engaged with academics? That's the question which I would like to raise, and probably I would like other panelists to also make observation and comments before we move on.
Good afternoon, Professor. Good afternoon, my friends. It's absolutely a huge pleasure for all of us to be building tomorrow's India. Inspiration of the next decade, decades. I think it's a huge. I would put that very strong thematic connect when you look at which we need to build. Getting straight into the subject, I think let me context my name. I think this is very relevant for all the professors, and Mr. Sinha, it is an excellent, very relevant and most important to address today. Now, I just like to take that the entire discussion forward with very three fundamental elements, which to context the entire bridging the communication. First, I think that we need to understand what's globalization landscape. What's happening? If we really understand the globalization landscape, we'll be probably able to connect it more intensely into what are the challenges in terms of the communication gap and what we intend to bridge the gap. Now, when I talk about the entire landscape, I really look at that first very clearly. I think that probably last 10 years, the type of innovation which has happened. It has never happened probably in the last 50 years. Today, if you look at the affordability of the innovations, are huge ramification for the society, for the nations, and for the humanity. That brings me to the fundamental question. That question is that are we engaged? Are we our curriculum? Are our students? Are our institutes in India? Are we engaged in terms of creating that big picture of innovation? And when I talk about innovation, it is not only the iPads, not only the iPhones, not only, there are many elements of innovation. The supply chain innovation. Look at what China has converted the entire opportunity of moving the manufacturing sector, the supply chain sector, the logistics sector as a core hub of their economic growth. That's huge. Now, does our institutes, are we ready? Are we, as our core competence in the institutes, IIMs, IITs, NITs, are you addressing those? If I look at the core competences which are being developed in, most of the developing emerging economies, are huge level of complex program management, the deep level of understanding the resource deployment, the deep level of understanding how we risk mitigate. My question is that are we addressing those in our course curriculum? Are we making our next generation to meet the challenges, emerging challenges of the Chinese, the Vietnamese, the Philippines, the Indonesians, or are we still into our own traditional curriculum? That makes me very clear that, my friends, you have seen that over the last 5 years, the nations have fallen back the West European nations have fallen back, who has not adopted this to this change. What really means to us to the curriculum here to set that or institute into a focus, into a direction, is to redefine how we come back on track in terms of addressing this globalization landscape. Point number 2, I think very important, which I think Mr. Sharma you talked about, where we look at from industry is that the professionals are no more a mechanical engineer or a cost accountant or a marketing folks. We look them at more entrepreneurial sort of a skill development. So when I look at that, are we building enough entrepreneurial skills into our students? Through our curriculum, through our engagement, through our multicultural.
Mr. Ghoshal, your thoughts on this?
Sure. Let me begin with That's fine. Let me begin by thanking Dr. Sena for inviting and the students here. This reminds me of probably my MBA days, quite a long time back, 20 plus years. And I used to similarly sit down and listen to similar discussions between academia and industry. And this debate has been going on for some time. Probably it is quite relevant, but let me put a little different perspective, because in my own career of 25 plus years, I have spent probably 50% of the time, more than that, abroad, and probably around 40-45% here in India. I have moved industries. I started in steel industry, Tata Steel. I moved into consulting. I went into IT industry. I was probably one of those pioneering days in the 90s when the whole Indian offshore industry was taking off. So I have seen that whole offshoring industry. It was like starting from zero to what today is $100 billion. I have spent time in a similar situation where when I went into that industry, there was nothing called the technology industry. Even globally, it was only in developed countries. We didn't have the skills, not only the technology skills, we didn't have the skills about the word consulting, but we adapted. Now, similarly, when I came back to India around 4 years back, I'm part of ENY, and as a consulting company, it is very interesting since Subir brought it up, because even in the consulting industry, Big Four like ENY, which has been there for a long time, it's like 140 years old company. But in our company also, there is a distinct flavor happening that the developing market, they call it emerging markets, will have to go its own way. It has to develop even consulting content relevant for Africa versus Russia versus China versus India. And interestingly, in fact now I've taken a new role of leading the technology industry for entire emerging markets globally. And what is interesting, I travel extensively to Africa, I travel extensively to Middle East. There are large corporations who are more interested in what experiences we have in other developing markets than developed markets, right? Now, the point I want to make probably from these two gentlemen is, see, the entire experience which you guys in your next 20 to 30 years will require to succeed is not known today. What skills you will require, what knowledge you require, you have to learn along the way. That's a fact of life, right? What I definitely feel you definitely need to have within you is not only the content, the hard subjects. We were just discussing with the professor here about the hard subjects which you need to learn here. What sometimes I feel which is missing is not the content, is the context. What you study, you will only use 5% of it in your life, but which 5% you don't know. It is the context, it is the attitudes you pick up along the way, which is very important here. And that's what when Subir was saying, we need to bring the skills which, let's say, is relevant for developing world. It is the applicability of the subjects you study which is more important. Okay, I'll give you classic examples. We recruited students from NITI for supply chain management last year. Last 2 years we have been recruiting. I have got large teams for that. The concepts you study about supply chain, when you actually go into developing economies like, let's say, Africa, the basic assumptions go for a toss. So you cannot just apply the supply chain concepts you learn. You have to understand the situations on the ground. You have to understand the issues on the ground, and then it is relevant about it. You talk about marketing. You have to understand the situations in a, let's say, in a very monopolistic countries, let's say regions like Russia or China, which has its own rules under which the entire marketing concept has to be done. Sales doesn't happen the way you sell in other markets. So the only point I want to put across here is from industry and academia perspective. I think we probably have in the last 30-40 years our management education has been in existence in India, taken a lot of concepts from developed world. We have been looking towards Harvard, we have been looking towards other large colleges as far as MBA is concerned. The next 20 years, the relevance and what you learn and what you should teach in these colleges probably has to be more relevant for the situations required in India today and tomorrow, and as Subir was saying, the situations which is going to come in the rest of the developing world. That's probably my perspective. One last point I thought, Professor, you were mentioning about even collaboration between industry and academics. I personally feel there can be a little more collaboration in terms of even helping the management colleges suit their content. I don't know how much of that happens in India. I'm sure the profs here probably struggle in getting even case studies which are from India. Okay, and being from a consulting organization, I can definitely help in that. So that's another area I feel in India we can do better. Thanks.
I completely agree with what Mr. Chowdhury and Mr. Ghoshal had to say, that probably today what we are talking about is more in the context of India, right? The communication gap between academia and industry, because in developed countries, especially in US, when I was in Boston, I saw that there is seamless movement across industry and academics. Professors are working with industries, they are invited, and there are, like chair positions in the academia where, senior leaders from the industry, they come and teach, they, publish papers. But that is missing in our country. Okay, that is one part. So, and secondly, I completely agree that the context is more important than the content. There is a limit to what academia can teach the students in a span of 2 years. So you are kind of given training which academia, and I completely agree that the content can always be customized more. Maybe inputs should be taken from the industry, and that is possible. But there is a limit to that. What we can do, right? Another thing, actually, when I was asked to moderate this session, immediately, actually, if I can quote you, Mr. Devrajan, the other day we had a dinner, and there was discussion about faculty internship, and you sir made a comment which actually struck me, because you said there shouldn't be any expectation from any side. Why is that? each of us should expect from the other. Academia should have a lot of expectation from the industry, and the industry should have a lot of expectation from the academia, because I feel that the academia is like, we are, like supplying the products to you. You are, like we are.
Once in a year, once in a 2 years kind of a situation like this, in which we talk about certain expectations. I think probably we'll have to look broadly in terms of creating forums, creating channels through which on a regular basis we academics engage itself with industry, and industry also does the vice versa. The issue with us, when I reflect on whatever experience I have, how many academic institutions we have worked in different capacities, and maybe other panelists can also comment on that. How many academic institutions have approached them in saying that we are now in a process of structuring our course contents, and therefore we need to have your inputs. They are happening in pockets. I'm not generalizing it, but I think that this quantity and the quantitative research is very limited. Who should take the lead? Who should take the initiative? Should academic come forward and say, hey, we want to design, we want to prepare students for the industry. Can you share with us your thoughts? Where are the forums? And I am now talking something very practical, and from the industry point of view, that what we receive from management institutes are the brochures which talks about the profile of the students, the request for summer placements, and the request to come for the campus recruitment and to be there with the students and to select the best of them. This is a very good process. It should happen. But probably my suggestion would be that we have to look more beyond than that. Do we as an industry, do we get to know regularly what academics is doing, what a particular management institute is doing? What are the highlights? What are the good achievements? You just showed us the audiovisual. This is a good starting point of saying, here we exist. But more than that, probably as a person from industry, I would like to know how IIM Kashipur's students are doing during 2 years period when they are there. Not only this 2 years period, how IIM Kashipur is otherwise doing. What kind of research the IIM Kashipur is doing. What kind of industry interactions they are having. Are there any kind of communication channels created in which the industry regularly gets this information and inputs? I think probably the answer is create more channels of communication, create more opportunities for communication and expectation sharing, which is a more practical approach. Otherwise, some of these thoughts which my other colleagues, panelists have, will remain with the industry and probably will never be transmitted to the academics. So we'll have to really think seriously in terms of engagement, engaging industry, engaging academics. So that's the reason why I come back to my question. What is the need? Is industry really interested in engaging them? It's good to talk about that, yes, these are the kind of skill sets which your students should have, but what kind of utilization is done of those skill sets when talking about practical aspects? Do we really see that? Many a times we see that give us a good, bright student and probably we know how to mold him or her. This is normal answer which you normally get. And therefore what we are interested in is a good matter which probably you can convert based on your need. If that is so, and if you want as an industry, I'm asking myself, and if you really are interested in getting better students who are more proficient in the kind of skill sets which you need, have you communicated to them? Have they come to you? Have you participated in the research? As an HR professional, I'm saying, whenever we think in terms of doing any kind of diagnostic study organization-wide, maybe it's a culture, maybe a system processes, things like that, why we have to all the time think of PwC, EY, McKinsey's of the world? Why we don't look at the management institutes? What is the issue? Why the first thought doesn't come to our mind that we have to look at these management institutes which are doing a good amount of work and research, and probably we can really support them through this initiative. I think these are other questions which as an industry, because they are also answerable, we have to really evaluate. So I'm just I'm asking very practical, honest questions to the whole audience. What are we actually doing? We have all our thoughts, but are we communicating? That's more important.
that point across, maybe to yourself. 2 points. One is, maybe you can explain, are there limitations in our whole entire, the way management education is run in the country, that you cannot go beyond certain boundaries laid down? Is it true that those are the boundaries beyond which you can't do what he is asking?
No, absolutely not. Actually, I mean, that is what he said when, since today, again, like coming back to the point, it seems that the problem is there currently with India. In the context of what Mr. Chowdhury said, that currently with globalization, see what China is doing, what other countries are doing. So, there are no limitations, but probably the problem is, so far what we have been trying to do, and that is not only true for academia, that is true for all the other areas of India, like we try to just, like replicate what the best practices are there out in the world, but that may not be the best practice for us. So we are trying to develop courses which are floated in, say, Harvard or Sloan, but maybe we need to have, like very innovative courses, and as like you suggested, that we should take suggestions from our industry, that what is the need of the hour. And in that context, I had another question for all of you, is that there are two things. One is the short-term requirement that you have. In the previous discussion before the break, there were talks about the current requirement. Okay, so there is one thing which you require immediately, and sometimes to some extent it's about damage control measures. We need this kind of skill immediately. But another is about capacity building, some short, long-term plans of the industries. I mean, each of your companies would be having some long-term goals. This is how we want to see ourselves in the future, and this is the kind of people we would like to have in our organization. So, do you think do you even think about these people when you hire them? Do you think about those goals, or are you hiring them just to meet your short-term goals or demands? That could also be relevant in, having our courses.
Yeah, no, definitely, just to answer Professor Nag's question, that if a company has got a structured plan for development of people, obviously we'll look at these young pass outs as a resource which ultimately will be utilized, and in a short term, in a long term basis, what activity we need. But the practical reality of life is little different. I think let's also face it. And therefore, many a times in the organizations who have very structured programs, and they succeed also to some extent, but they also face limitation in terms of the attrition which normally happens after second or third year of a young graduate engineer or an MBA joining them. So, however well they may plan, probably the probability of their succeeding would be about 30-40% for a long-term perspective. And especially in the industries where we are, the new economy industry which we are currently seeing, the retention is a big issue. So therefore, if you have a long-term perspective and you have a long-term perspective in mind while recruiting these students, possibly the realities of life are also different. And the kind of the attractions which the students find after 2-3 years, moving on to another industry, and there is churn which normally happens. Telecom, IT, I mean, there are all the good examples where people have not stayed on, even the bright students, though they have a career, they can see some kind of a growth plan, they have not stayed on. The business realities also at times they also change. So even you might have designed a well-structured program for future, but then you never know what kind of business realities you will experience. So industry is also working with some kind of limitations that we have to really understand and be pragmatic about that. But my thought would be that let's keep on evaluating and exploring, and therefore there has to be a constant dialogue, which I'm emphasizing, which is of course we're talking about communication gap only. But my point is that we are not creating enough opportunities for that dialogue to happen, and that's what we need to do more.
Can I ask a question? Sorry, I'm asking a question. Let me put a point across to you, Professor Nag, and probably to the other professors. When you put this subject across, what was your expectations out of the subject?
When I came into business, management education, I thought it was my job to educate, impart education and be a part of the team which prepares these young people to go out in the industry and perform. But later what I realized was, after having seen all these, these placement processes, the CAT admissions and everything, I had this sense of discomfort. I have always been having this sense of discomfort that it seems to me that industry for the industry, academia is kind of a filtering machine, a filtering process, and to try to separate the good material from the bad. And these days, the task of the academia is to throw challenges to these people, and if they have been able to tackle that and pass through the filter, they are good enough to handle challenges in the industry. But the challenges may not be the same as what they will be handling in the industry. It just says that like they have some intelligence, they have some preparedness to handle challenges, and that is all that the industry expects from the academia. And after that, it is always on-the-job training. And I think what is worse is, this is for you students, that I feel the students also think that, like all of these things that they learn in the class, it is going to be of no use in the future. And what they are going to, actually learn is when they go into the industry. So this is, like severe discomfort on my part, because I feel that, I'm trying to, send them with something into the real world. And I strongly believe that, especially in the context of what you said, that the context is more important than the content, because I feel that some groundwork or some kind of, it's like preparing the ground and sending them there, and then let them sow the seed in that. And when you said that you have been changing industries and you adapted, that is because you had that fundamental training in you. So it is not about having customized training, this year retailing is important, so we are going to have retail training. Next year some 10 years back it was IT. So we cannot have that. What is important is the education rather than training. We are in the education business, not training business. I mean, this is my feeling, so I wanted to know what you think about that.
Just one quick point. I think she stood her ground, right? Okay. No, thanks, Professor Nag. So, the reason I asked the question is, there are a couple of pointers which probably we need to keep in mind. 15 years back, 20 years back, what you learn, the longevity, or I would say the rate of obsolescence was much lower. Today, the industries change, the context change, even within telecom, the generations, you mentioned telecom, it has gone from 2G to 3G to 4G. Now when we discuss with the telecom company, they're talking of content, they're not talking of technology at all. Right? So, couple of points as far as this industry-academia collaboration which is important. And one is, from the industry, one of the things which probably you can instill in a lot of these young guys' minds is that what I find typically, Professor Sinha, you can probably also, with your background, comment, is a lot of young guys coming out today, they want to become managers from day one. Right? And that's probably the reason why within a couple of years they're all ready to move on. Life is hard, life doesn't work like that. You have to specialize, you have to learn something, then move on to the next one. So one of the biggest issues we find from the industry is that probably the expectations which the students have, and I don't know what's the reason, because we also came from the same grind, and it is the expectations which people need to have set very rightly. And probably one of the reasons is, from the industry we find that we are producing a lot of engineers, a lot of MBAs and all that, and half of the time, or maybe 90% of the time, they don't work in their industries. They become generalists after a while. They are not ready to... See, you mentioned just now that 80% of your students are engineers, right? And I'm sure 80% of those guys don't want to go back into anything to do with engineering. Okay. Now, I also went through the same process. I was an engineer, then became an MBA, but I went through the grind of actually going through the process of learning what industry is actually, what technology and engineering is applied. So first is, if you look at industry and academia, is the applicability of what you are learning, that context is missing. And I'll give you classic examples. In my 10 years in the IT industry, technology industry, Wipro, Infosys, TCS went through a major upswing. The biggest problem they used to find is that it is very hard if they take an engineer, forget about MBAs, they take an engineer, to get that guy to pull up their sleeves and learn and last long enough to be able to use that. Then they realize it is easier to take a science graduate and make that guy go through learning plus going to engineering college, maybe a part-time course over a period of 4-5 years. That guy will be more grounded. Okay, it was a classic explanation. You ask lot of industries, and I'll actually tell you from experience also. They always wonder, if I go to a top-notch IIM, top-notch college, including yourselves, how long will the guys last? So the point you mentioned, that do I invest in a guy for a couple of years and the guy will scoot somewhere else? Now, one is this context, setting expectations right, and also ensuring the product which is coming out is really relevant for the industry. So that is one part of it. And the second you mentioned around the collaboration perspective. Now, interestingly, last year, ENY actually collaborated with ISB and set up a joint course, which actually the course is suited to consulting industries, various parts of it. I am sure if you similarly have, and there are two parts of it from my experience globally. Globally there is collaboration, I have seen. There is collaboration from a content perspective and even collaboration from the faculty being also having collaboration. Now, I, for example, I would love to teach, okay, but I have found out that it becomes very difficult to actually become a visiting professor on a longer term basis. Okay, there are certain subjects, but if you find out and try to come out with a variation of the subject which has a theory plus more leaning towards some industry, it is very difficult, because they're always told, no, this is what we have to actually teach. You cannot actually have variances. I don't know, it's a question of there is a regulatory body which decides it, or it varies from college to college.
It varies. I mean, at least for us, we in fact had an award for innovative courses. So I think this is something Professor Sinha should, take it. I mean, I'm sure the students would be thrilled to have you or any of you to have as a faculty, visiting faculty, and Sinha can probably take that.
Responding to what you just asked, last year we had a full 30-hour course on core consulting skills run by 3 consultants, one from PwC, one from KPMG, and one I think ENY. Full 30-hour course, complete with and there were no exams. The course ended with a mock engagement. So the whole class was divided into 4 teams. Each team went through the same engagement. Everybody had a role to play. Somebody was the director, technical, somebody was the next person. So we tried that, and my friend Kunal from Operations, this year we're collaborating with Dassault Systems, run a course called Global Collaboration in Manufacturing. It's run by Dassault Systems. A third course we are running in great support from the Competition Commission of India. Their members come and take sessions along with members of law firms and say strategy heads of companies. It's called Competitive Landscape. So we have been trying to engage with the industry. But as I think Barnali was saying, there is a limit given the span of time and the expectations. There is a limit to how much we can customize for a certain industry. There will be some gap, because Even if I prepare, for example, if I try to prepare somebody for the earth moving industry, there will be a gap between telecom and JCB. Right? Because culturally, technologically, whatever. So there is an element of gap that will be there. But as far as coming closer is concerned, having been on both sides of the fence, there are certain things which are a very harsh reality. For example, if I ask 10 letters to chief executives of 10 companies asking them to participate in a curriculum design, the response is, I wouldn't say not even tepid. And then, if I say, can you spare one of your executives 6 times in the next 3 months? No, Professor, that would be very difficult. So, you can't run, there are certain limitations to education, it has a certain format. We can't totally destroy that format. For example, a course is 30 hours. Now, one executive cannot come twice and do 15 hours of teaching and go away. You'll go through the motions, but the assimilation will be zero. So, I'm not saying it's easy to spare a manager, but if the step is not taken, then this collaboration is not possible. For example, last year, one of my friends here, we actually started the concept of faculty internship. The faculty went and stayed in the company for 15 days to find out what's happening. So, both of us have to take steps. But possibly we at Kashipur, we have no paradigms, so we have no baggage. We are willing to take a step forward, but there has to be a corresponding step from the other side. For example, if you want to write a case, then this whole fear of losing my proprietary knowledge information, which is largely unfounded, comes to the fore. Right? The best of American companies share their cases with Harvard. And the sad part is, the same Indian companies will share it with Harvard, but not with IIM Kashipur.
So that means, that's a good point actually, so thanks for that. And I presume because, as you said, you're in your pioneering days, so you have more freedom to like that. So, because we are probably closer to the trends happening, if let's say we want to collaborate and say, here is the sort of skills required, a couple of years down the line, because we can see what is happening. We're just discussing, for example, analytics, right? Now, that's a fast changing speed, entire predictive analytics area. If we want to sort of collaborate around that and say, here is what I require a year down the line, will you, is that you have flexibility to do accordingly?
It's possible. I am have that flexibility. It needs basically what the process of starting a new course or rather a subject, take that, is
The faculty council.
Professor, one dimension which I just got and from what Professor Nag talked about. Now, we all know that from our, from a national priority point of view, there are a few sectors which are going to be the core growth sector for the next few decades. We hear about, national manufacturing policy, right? We hear about, major shortage of high-level project management, talents. Now, and those are the things which probably next 20 years will be drawing us back in terms of driving, the whole growth. And that's what I think that, realigning with the national priorities and dimensioning ourselves in terms of our curriculum, how we bring, those factors. And probably, you being a pioneer, you are absolutely the top-notch institutes, IIMs are the top-notch brand, IITs, RITs. Now, how are, we are, because if you really look at, even today, the kids are all onto IT. The kids are all onto, ITS. Now, and the core, the growth sector has to be the manufacturing, the growth sector has to be infrastructure, complex project management, operational standard. Professor Ghoshal, we are talking a little bit back. Now, how we keep aligning and realigning.
Chowdhury Sahab, we are a part of the problem we are trying to solve. If you ask your son, I'm going to join, can I join HCC and their, some project in the highway? They said, no, please go to Infosys, sit in IC, sit in the AC room. So we are a part of the problem we are trying to solve.
Right. Absolutely. And,
you would not like your son to work in the sun in some 100-kilometer super highway project where he is,
on the
harsh elements.
On the sideline, that's what Samiron was talking. We love to, see people grinding through that process of really making their hands very caring, and that's where the learning happens.
No, that's what I'm saying. Somewhere we are responsible for their attitudes.
Absolutely. So, are you bringing those type of elementary focus? As you really look at, I am 70.
I completely agree. India's succor lies only through manufacturing. You can't go from an agrarian economy to a service economy
8%.
without taking a major step in manufacturing. It doesn't happen. Not a large country like India. It can happen for 500 square kilometers in Singapore. It can happen.
That's simple.
But not in India, it cannot happen.
Correct.
And we have to take that development step of agriculture, manufacturing, then service economy. I know that. I know that. But no, honestly, I mean, we as a generation. We as a generation are responsible for that.
That is the biggest challenge. We are all making, as Samiron said, finance managers, chartered accountants, but not cutting the hands in terms of mega project management. It's a huge.
Just to quick reflection on a comment which you made in terms of a CEO not responding to the requests which are very genuine requests for a good cause or a good purpose. I think one of the suggestions which I would have, I think probably we'll have to explore areas in which we can do some kind of a complementary research work. Now, I'm saying complementary doesn't mean that your minimum expenses are not really taken care of, but something which is of interest to the industry of that CEO who has an issue in terms of saying that, hey, we bring to you some research work which you will participate and some other organization will also participate, and then that will be of much use to you. I think these are some of the mechanisms which probably the academics have to really design in terms of creating that kind of interest which you want to be created. And I totally agree with you that it's too much the plate of students also. I mean, to be with them, I mean, there is also a limitation of what all can be grasped, what all can be really learned during 2 years period. And if you give a long laundry list of things to acquire, to be developed and things like that, really any student will get confused. So therefore, on a focused approach basis, some kind of a complementary research work should be done, which I've seen some of the good organizations they do, and we all participate in that, and then it's of mutual benefit to the academics as well as for the industry. I mean, just a small suggestion which I thought I'll make in this area.
Professor Ranjan.
Yeah, just actually, I'll be expressing some contrarian viewpoints. People will not agree with me. But one of the points which Professor Sinha mentioned, I'll add to that. So my observation of MBA graduates, and I've been involved in this IIMs, Bangalore and Calcutta for 35 years, is that everyone wants a juicy job. Now it happens that my son also went to that route of IIT. Then he graduated from Bangalore. The first job was with Maruti Suzuki, and he didn't like some of the routine things that he was told to do, because he thought that being an IIT, IIM graduate, why should you do all these things? Then finally I had to persuade my friend Gopalakrishnan, who was my classmate in school and college, director of Tata Sons, to speak to my son. And after Gopalakrishnan spoke to him, he was convinced, because he gave the example that when he joined Hindustan Lever, he started his job in the marketing field. For some time he was posted in Orissa. There were certain places where there was no motorable road, so he had to travel in a pull-up cart. Now, he said that was a learning process. He went through something similar in Goa also. Now, we don't always realize this, but all this is a learning process. Here is a question of attitude. Most MBAs, I mean, this is the feedback we got from industry when I was in Calcutta, that from day one, people want to get involved in corporate planning, as if they have already experience of 10 years. So they would not like to work in a shop floor, or actually go and sell something. because they'll say this is selling and not marketing. But that is also part of the job. I mean, you actually learn, you interact with customers and learn. So this is one aspect that Indians have to sort of change their attitude. And they should not mind doing all sorts of work, because that is an experience by itself. I'll tell you an experience about Samsung. We have this advanced management program in IIM Calcutta, so as the program director, so I had to take these participants. So that year we went to China, Korea and Singapore. And one of the organizations we visited for a day was Samsung. And I remember we went to this television assembly plant. And the people there told us that if you had come one week earlier, you would have seen there's a particular place in the assembly line which they showed, where this head of the Chevron, who is quite an old man, the owner and chief executive, he spends 1 week on the assembly plant assembling just like any other worker. And he repeats that in other work centers. I mean, not only for televisions, but let's say it can be washing machines, it can be even the construction site. So he does this hands-off job, and he knows exactly what the problems are. I mean, he doesn't have an MBA degree, but he is more practical than most other people, because even the people who work on the shop floor are confined to one type of activity all their life, but he goes across different industries. Samsung is involved in a large number of industries, including construction. In fact, they were the project managers for some of the top, they executed this Burj Khalifa project, the building in Taipei, then this Petronas Stars in Malaysia, etc. So this is something that if the owner of a Chevron with a turnover of $200 billion is willing to do, why not young MPs? Now, coming to the curriculum aspects, this is an issue which has not been resolved. In fact, in the United States also, if you look at the curriculum of top business schools, there's a tremendous amount of variation. There's one school of thought led by Harvard, which is oriented towards case studies. And then there is the other school of thought, you can say, led by Carnegie Mellon, which doesn't believe so much in case studies. MIT used to belong to that category, but now MIT uses more cases. And Stanford also uses quite a lot of cases, not they develop cases themselves. But during the 1980s, when Herbert Simon, who was a Nobel laureate, he also got the Turing Prize for computer science. He was the dean of the School of Industrial Administration. They don't call it business school. Later on, he became president of the university. So, although he was an academician, he also did a lot of institution building and administrative work. Now, when he was dean, one of the things he wrote in that manual that comes MBA book, as to what are the objectives of MBA education. And he wrote something which was somewhat radical. He said, it is not so much that it will equip you to solve the problems for the next 1 year or 2 years, but it will provide you a foundation so that for the next 30 or 40 years, you can go on learning. That means it will provide you the basic tools, whether it is economic analysis or quantitative analysis, etc. If you have the basic foundation, then you should be able to read books and journals and educate yourself on your own. And because he said the world is unpredictable, this is something which you always talk about. But if you look at it from an operational point of view, if we try to predict what would happen 20 years later, I don't think we can succeed. I mean, who could have said 20 or 25 years earlier that our life would be dominated by the cell phones and all this, browsing on the internet using Google? Nobody could have done it. So the world is changing in such a way that your education should equip you to go through that transformation. You should be able to educate yourself. I mean, it's not always possible for you to go through management development programs at a later date, although that is one of the things which is used. And there is always this uncertainty in the industry. And whether you talk of industry or any other field, and this is something that cannot be taught in a business school or even in an engineering institute. There's a classic example. It happened with semiconductors, later it happened with lasers. The reason I'm giving this example is that even US industry has not always succeeded. You see, when the semiconductor was invented in Bell Labs, the key person was William Shockley, because he had grades back in the body. Now, he invented the semiconductor. This was a paper published in some journal. He was prodding Bell Labs to apply this, to use this in their communication networks and other places. And he failed. He took it up with other industries. Radio Corporation of America, RCA, was the leading electronics company in the world in those days. They were what Sony and Samsung are today. And they had complete monopoly. Now, RCA tried to introduce this semiconductors. This was in the early 50s. They installed it in a television. They replaced the vacuum tubes with a semiconductor. And it didn't work because this semiconductor, the state of the art, as it was at that time, was not equipped to carry so much current without some amount of power that is required. What happened next is that it was Sony Corporation of Japan, which was very successful in implementing semiconductors. They started with a hearing aid, where the power requirement is something like 3 or 4 watts. And once they were successful with hearing aid, they actually went in for other devices. And they were the first one to introduce this in radios and television. In fact, this, the concept of the term that we use, transistor radio, was actually radios developed by Sony. RCA failed in implementing this, and the rest, as I say, is history, in the sense that from then onwards, RCA found it very difficult to compete with Japanese companies. They made a series of wrong decisions later on. It went on happening for the next few decades, and finally, the company had to wind up in the 90s. They filed for bankruptcy, and that was the end. This was a company formed by Thomas Edison. It was one of those icons in the US, just like TWA, Pan Am. You come across these buildings in Manhattan. But it is just a sign of what can happen to the largest corporations in the world. But what I'm trying to bring out from this particular case, in this anecdote, is that if you try to predict what will happen in the future, it's very difficult. So you have to learn how to respond to these changes. Because the pace of change is so rapid that you have to be able to do that rather than come up with some prediction as to what will happen 20 years later and expect business schools and engineering institutes to actually teach students or design the curriculum accordingly. And one of the contrary aspects which has come out is that in recent years you must have observed that some of the Asian countries have been doing extremely well in the field of manufacturing. In fact, in terms of the ranking manufacturing output, the 3 countries from Asia in the top 5. The only country which is not from Asia happens to be the United States and Germany. But otherwise, you have Japan, you have South Korea, and of course you have China. China has now become the leader. Surprisingly, in all these countries, with the exception of US, you find that MBS play much less of a role. But I'm not advocating that MBS should not have importance. Of course there should be. I have been in the field of MBA education for the last 35, 40 years. So MBS had a role, but these Asians have been extremely successful in spite of most of their executives not going to the MBA route. And in fact, even now, if you look at the curriculum, the standards of MBA education, it's not very high in these East Asian countries, but they are doing exceedingly well. Now, this is something, of course, I cannot draw a conclusion, but it's more an observation. So I stop.
opinion.
Yes.
Is that, see, I think that we cannot constantly change the curriculum courses.
Yes.
But we need to align with the nation's priority.
Yes.
And that's where I see that, that level of calibration alignment. As you rightly said, today manufacturing sector has a lot of people, but not enough talent.
Yeah.
We have program management. We have, hardly any people who scale up to the global program management, like, the mega management. Now today, I don't know how many of you know that there is a massive Indo-Japanese program going on. There are 9 mega cities going to be coming up. 9 mega cities. Like massive, like probably half of Delhi. 9, which is the Japanese collaboration. That's it, which is the Mumbai, Delhi, Mumbai.
Within the Delhi corridor.
That's right, that's corridor influence area, 9 cities. Now they have been doing benchmark, but we are speaking to Amitabh Kant, who is the managing director. Actually, he came for an address like for all of our employees. Now he said that we just can't, we are struggling, we are getting Japanese, we are getting Koreans, but people are not there to handle that sort of scale. 9 cities. Think of the corridors with 9 industrial cities, which go to have hub of industries. So I think that my perspective to this will be that we definitely need to align with the national priorities rather than 30 years ahead, what's going to happen, kya hoga, and then, really align our engineering curriculum, management curriculum. That, just to give you an example, Chinese.
No, I am not saying that it should be, you should teach what will happen with 30 years later. What I am saying is that you lay the basic foundations in the curriculum. Now, after that things should change. And as far as context is concerned, I agree with what you have said, that see, people should adapt themselves to the context in which they are operating. And you will find that India has a particular culture, East Asia has a different culture, the Western world has a different culture. Now, you have to operate in that context. So the manager has to be successful. I mean, he has to drive that.
Just to give an example.
It has to be contextual.
Just to give a small example to substantiate what I was saying. If I compare 1993 India and China, right, our high-level complex program management, we are slightly better than Chinese in terms of the skills, the professionals. And if you today look at 2013, probably 20 years, they are probably 12 to 1 times better than us. What has happened? The universities, the campuses, everybody has, the whole government has aligned I mean, Partho will be better to tell, he has lived in China, has completely oriented the Chinese education to handle that level of manufacturing programs, infrastructure program, high growth, generated, employment programs. So I think that's what the context I was talking about, really aligning, and then, everybody working around that core. We have been working for IT for probably 10, 15 years. Now we need to move forward and create those talents. So that's the context, Professor. But you are right that we cannot keep changing the process. But probably on a 20 years horizon or 15 years aligned on the national priorities.
Okay, we'll open the panel for questions from the students.
So before taking questions, due to time constraints, we'll be able to take only 2 questions.
I agree that to deal with dynamic environment, one requires entrepreneurial skills. But that is more of a skill part which can't be improved to much extent after 23 to 25 years. But in an academic institute, one can definitely focus on management science part, where specialization in a field via research should be encouraged. So it is more of generalization versus specialization. So I agree that you require entrepreneurial skills in current scenario, but in an academic institute, the priority should be focused on specialization, which can be realized via research. So,
what's your good name now?
Vibha.
Vibha, 2 things. One is that when you look at an entrepreneurial skill, it is not only setting up a factory or something. Even when you look at entrepreneurial skill, where your core R&D, core innovation goes, and how it is going to change and impact the society. Many of our institutes, what we understand, we know, the focus is more on not the literally which is going to change the society or going to impact, right? But we probably are coming from is that we need to refocus our energy in the institutes to get into a core research which will transform and bring innovation which are going to be driven by economic growth, and lots of we have a fantastic sector which is for pharmaceutical sector. We have a fantastic IT sector. We have, but probably many other sectors lagging behind. So what we are trying to say is that even in the R&D, core R&D, bring that entrepreneurial mindset and bring that what really drives focusing. Like Professor was talking in the US. Now there are focus, core areas where the developers are going on. So one is more of a theoretical, and so that's why we are challenging that we need to challenge ourselves and we need to bring context to that. So that is the part of the. We are not saying that there should be research, absolutely. Now supply chain. Now supply chain innovation is an absolutely high-end ongoing programs globally. How you cut cost, how you bring efficiency. So that those core researchers should go on. But what we are saying is that focusing in terms of driving, it has to be with society. It has to be with economy. It has to be not just for more of a black box research, which gives us a payback in 20 years. So those are the things we are talking about. The second part, I think I couldn't get your question. Are you saying 25, 23 years after that, you can't make? I couldn't get that. You said,
It's more of a question of skills versus science.
No, it is not versus, but skills to drive our attitude. Because what we do is that when you are running with an entrepreneurial skill, right, you look the holistic picture. You look at the entirety. Whereas if I look, don't get me wrong, when I look at a Babu context, Babu means the bureaucrat, right? Now they like to see that that level of that core where he is or she is there. So I'm saying that when you are looking at an entrepreneur, you look at that the whole business profile. What it brings to the organization, to you, to how fast, the energy, the entirety. So when I say it's not a complaint, even a research can drive. I know we can talk about stories of Samsung. Professor, Samsung, there is a fantastic case study. How 20 years back they overthrew GE completely. And how they graduated from there and became a probably top 15 in the top global most respected company. So it is focusing entrepreneurial skill in terms of really delivery oriented mechanism, a structure, right? And that needs to be driven by all of us. And unless we get into that level, we get into more of a theoretical, which we have been living through, 2%, 1% GDP growth. We need to move to 7%. We need to move our BPL levels up. So that is the context of the entrepreneurial skill.
Okay, can we have the second question?
Actually, it's two-part question. First, leaving aside professors and industry interaction apart for some time, what can a student do? What can student take proactive steps to improve, to bridge the gap themselves? And second question is that many industry experts talk about out-of-the-box thinking. So by the end of 2 years, many students are just able to figure out what is the box about, rather than thinking out of the box. So how can we build our out-of-the-box thinking?
Who is this question for?
For all the time.
Okay.
Very good.
I'm trying to pick the key bullet points of the question you asked. I'll take a couple of pointers from what you're asking. My guess what you're asking is, as a student yourself, irrespective of this ongoing debate, as a student yourself, how best you align yourself to bridge the gap yourself, right? I actually will go back a couple of months back. I was asked to write an article in Business Standard about, is it possible that India will ever have its own Silicon Valley? Okay, and we actually, I wrote an article on that. Now, I know a lot of friends who are there who have made millions also. Some of them, couple of them probably my batchmates also. But I'll tell you, as far as you individuals are concerned, there are few mantras you have to remember this. Okay? The people who succeed, taking a key a leaf from what Subir said. People who succeed have to have couple of key traits which you have to remember. The word entrepreneurship which Subir used also has another coinage called intrapreneurship. Right? Ultimately, what does it mean? Ultimately, it means your risk-taking ability. That is the gist of it. So, you as students have to learn a few traits going forward. One is, the world is changing much fast. It will change much faster in your lifespan, working lifespan, than what has happened in ours. So you have to be looking at the trends happening tomorrow. Okay? Subir's question about why do engineers and MBAs don't want to join the manufacturing sector? It has a little bit of a prestige issue, it's a little bit of a comfort issue, and probably, I would say, the herd mentality. Right? When I moved from, I'm a mechanical engineer originally, and when I moved to technology, at that time my father asked me, why did I make you learn mechanical engineering? It was exactly the reverse question. Nobody used that computer industry didn't exist that time. Okay? So you don't know 10 years down the line what Subir is saying. Maybe there are other industries with a more high-tech manufacturing base which will become the mainstay of people's careers. So look forward, take risks. Okay, that's one thing. Second is taking a leak out of this industry and academia. As I said, you probably will use only 5% of what you learn in your life. Which 5% you don't know, right? So always remember the context of what you learn. There are various things which are taught to you in MBA. And frankly speaking, I found my MBA education to be more interesting than engineering, because I learned very fast. And at any point of time, even 20 years down the line, you will be using some part of it. So 6 months back, I was actually designing career tracks for consulting. Because consulting organizations, now there are so many different types of streams we go in. So I actually was using a lot of, when I was discussing with HR folks, I have to remember what all are the various things we learn. So it's a question of, again, in your areas, look at the future of what are the applications of what you're learning. And the rest is the fact that you guys are here after some tough exams means you guys are good. It's just like giving yourself you see.
Just one final comment. Just one final comment which I would like to add to what you just mentioned, and to answer your question. I think during the 2 years stint which you have with the institute, work with your professor to, or maybe even when you do your internship, work on a project which talks more about sharing of expectations between industry and academia. I think this is one contribution which you can make, and maybe some of the other students can also take up this kind of a project as a research, so that you can give it back to the institute that this is what we have captured, this is what the expectation of the industry is, and it's a dialogue which I have initiated. That's number one. And second most important part is that stay connected with the institute even after you pass out, so that this is something which you will keep on doing it for a number of years, and to contribute to this, bridging this gap, and do your bit, whatever is possible, to make sure that you share expectations, capture them, transfer them to the institute, and also get a feedback for the industry. I think that's what you say.
Will you get his name? What's his name? Siddharth.
Okay, we have run out of time, so we'll end the discussion today, and thank you so much, Mr. Sharma, Mr. Ghoshal.
We would like to present a guest with a small token of appreciation, and I request Professor T. Srinivasan, Faculty IIM Kashipur, to do the honors.
We would like to take a moment and thank each and every one of our esteemed guests for coming and enlightening us. I hope this discussion and understanding how the promotion of free thinking can help companies and help us bridge this gap.
Added to what Gaurav just said, the day also saw speakers touch base issues like how a seamless process of free thinking can be promoted through value creation and innovation. The day also witnessed our batchmates give a presentation to highlight the students' take on the industry-academia collaboration. We also had our professors here who illustrated the existence of the communication gap and how effectively can it be bridged. I'm sure everybody present in this room would agree with me if I say that it was a very productive day for all of us in terms of knowledge and insights gained. Before calling the day off, I would like to brief you up on tomorrow's schedule. We should have 2 panel discussions on the following themes: research and innovation, emerging solutions to evolving business problems, industry-driven academic institution, approach, strategy and financial sustainability. The event tomorrow is scheduled to begin at 9:30 a.m. So I request you all to take your seats by 9:15 a.m. We have a cultural event scheduled for this evening, so I request you all to take your seats by 5:50 a.m. at the same venue. With this, we come to the end of the second day of the Leadership Conclave 2013-14. Thank you all.